Well, good evening and welcome to the School of Prophets and Seers with Edward and Ann, sonsofgod.com. This is Sunday evening, August 25th. We're obviously live. So we've got an important agenda to talk about this evening. This is probably one of the more deeper teachings for the School of Prophets and Seers than we've done in quite some time. So let's say, Lord, we look for your anointing. Lord, bring the word, bring clarity, impartation. Lord, open our minds to understand and to see beyond the veil, because that is what we need to do. We need to see beyond the veil. I made a comment earlier this afternoon when I was chatting with a young man, and I said, before you really can see, the first thing is that you've got to take the rose-colored glasses off. And so much of the world, they view reality, they view truth by virtue of what they want it to be. And more than we realize, people are walking around with rose-colored glasses to really give them a view based on what they believe or what they want to believe is really here. But the fact remains that, like we said before, what you see is not what is. What's unfolding has such a greater depth to it than we understand, and we really only begin to understand it as we break deeper and deeper through the veil and really begin to see what is happening. It's one thing to say, well, there's an operation of a spirit here. We live in a world of spirit. And we talked about that in the first book, that we live literally in an ocean of spirit. If you can imagine yourself immersed in this ocean, and the water, everything is around you. And that's what it's like. We don't see, we have not seen, to the degree that we will, the whole realm of spirit, the whole world of the Father's kingdom. A lot of it largely has been, theory to many. We have been fortunate in what God has shown us and brought us through firsthand to really begin to dissect down what's really unfolding and to really get a proper perspective, because it's very easy when you walk with God, especially in this climate of illusion and deception and darkness, to lose your perspective or to have a bit of a difficulty in getting a proper perspective and holding it. It's like trying to focus the lens of a camera. And as much as you try, sometimes it can be very difficult to get that lens in focus. So everything is always just a little bit off. You see, but sometimes it's a little hazy. It's like, I see men as trees walking type of thing. And so but there's no way around it. That is the path of the Son. That is the path of becoming a seer. It's not some fairy tale story of Merlin and, or whatever, the fables. What God is bringing the sons into comes really only one way. The school of hard knocks, the school of going through the deep work of the cross. Because in reality, you are the one that's seeing, but it's not you, because it's Christ in you. And you can say, well, that's interesting. We have the theory, we have a a concept of what these things mean. But really, the more you get out of the way, the more I get out of the way, the more the Lord becomes everything within us. And He is the one that sees, and it's His authority, and it's His life being lived through us on this plane. And yes, it is us. You can't separate the servant from you can't separate one from the other, us from the Lord Himself. It's all one. And the deeper we press through this veil, the more we recognize that it is Christ in us. That is a reality. It is not a theory. It is not a placard that you make a wood plaque and put it on the wall. Christ in us, the hope of glory. A lot of placards out there, but the path for the sons is a path of reality. It's a path people don't want. They don't want to pay the price. But anyway, we don't want to go down that road. We've been down that road before. What we want to talk about this evening is a fresh perspective on what's unfolding right now in the earth. And I held it before the Lord for some time now, whether or not this should be brought out and taught or discussed or not. But I think it's important that we continue to get our bearings as we move forward, because we're only at the beginning of so much. But I mean, we are at the beginning. We're not waiting for the times of judgment and the whole scenario the Father has for this end time. It's here, It's here, it's now. And we're living in real time. So it's important that we have the proper perspective on everything that's going on. And I know it can be sometimes difficult because there's an operation of a spirit behind it, but at times you can't really identify it. So you just kind of have to take it in faith until the day when the vision opens. Or like it, I think it's Paul, or I forget who mentions it, but when the day star rises, the morning star and the whatnot, the day star rises in your hearts and whatnot, you know where that is. And that's kind of what we're pushing into. So we're doing kind of a random table talk thing this evening. This is not really prepared. I just have a few things that we're going to take a look at. So just visualize yourself sitting here in the living room with us. And we're just talking and sharing. There's nobody on a pedestal here except the Lord. But we're looking for the eyes of our heart to open up on a deeper level. It's time. So we're going to talk about this whole COVID-19 thing that's been going on. I don't want to really go into it on a natural plane of what's unfolding and the FDA and all these organizations. I mean, it is a travesty, but the problem is people believe it. So, but we're not going to go down that road. But what I do want to talk about is the fact that we are dealing with a realm of spirit. Nothing new. And ever since the COVID thing began, the Lord began to give very specific insight as to what we were dealing with. Because when you're aware, you are able to take authority, and you're able to just rightly position yourself before God and not just get thrown down the tube of deception and darkness and propaganda and lies and whatnot. So The first thing we're going to talk about is the origin of the COVID scenario, the COVID spirit. And now you're thinking, okay, well, are we going to get on a soapbox here and start talking about, Chinese things and stuff like that? I'm not really interested in what the enemy is doing on a natural plane. But what I am interested is what is happening in the realm of spirit. And when you stop and you think about the COVID-19 virus and all of the outcropping that's been happening with that, you can initially get an idea in your head that we're dealing with a virus. We're dealing with some medical phenomena, something that is some virus thing. It's kind of vague, and it's attacking the immune system of the body, and so it's kind of like a cold. It's just this nebulous thing we call a virus. But the truth of the matter is, and we've been watching this since about March or April of 2020, is that when this whole thing came down, it was very interesting because, and I'm going to show you a picture of something, we'll get a chuckle out of this, but when this whole thing began, the Lord took us and we saw, and He's been doing that more and more lately, kind of like just going and sitting in the inner room and watching what's unfolding. And this was certainly the COVID virus was certainly created in Wuhan, that is the source. But the genius or the intelligence behind this was actually a multi-nation or multi-country effort. There were scientists from various countries working and involved in creating this. For what reason? Well, we probably don't need to go over that right now, but it was a multinational effort. But what they, of course, as they were endeavoring to create this virus that was going to be, have such a dominable stance and be so easily spread, I'm sure their viewpoint was they're creating something of a living virus thing in a test tube, but what they really created was a spirit. The whole realm of creation is overshadowed by the realm of spirit. Everything. You can't look at something, even, let's say, a tree, and not realize that there's a spirit involved there. That tree has a spirit. Various levels of creation have spiritual entities or spiritual basis. Some are highly intelligent, others not so much. But what was interesting is when they created this virus, what emerged was an entity that didn't even really know what it was at first. It was confused, and it had to kind of find out what it was, because it was a living, created entity. And it's not that difficult to create entities per se, but this one was very much an experiment in creating an entity with a very certain focus and mission, you might say. And so as I saw groups of people, and I saw this spirit emerge, and I printed out a picture of something to show you. This spirit is probably about maybe 2 feet tall and looks very much like this, maybe not as much hair. This was taken from a movie called The Gremlins. Okay, so if you remember the Gremlin movie, and take a look at this, that is very close to what the Wuhan virus looks like when it was first created. But what I found interesting is I watched, and they realized fairly quickly that they had created something that was out of their control. And this isn't a fairy tale story here. This is what we saw. They began to find ways to extinguish this spirit, and it became impossible. There was literally no way to kill what they've created. Every time they would attempt to do so, the spirit would vanish. Momentarily, short time, would reappear again and reappear again. And you could say, well, it's on the natural level, what are we talking about? Well, we could be talking about variants, the Delta variant, different variants like that. But nevertheless, this little creature was not necessarily created to be an evil entity, but what emerged, of course, has been very evil. And so that is an introduction to what the Wuhan spirit really looks like. Now, just a few months back, we had an opportunity once again to be taken in the spirit and look at what's unfolding right now. And so the reason even to talk about this is to understand that as valid as the Wuhan virus seems to be, it is not valid to the sons. This is something that can be rejected. You don't have to catch it. You don't have to be subject to this. You have dominion if you realize what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with some helpless situation of some virus that was just randomly created and, God help us all, we don't know what to do. It's just a spirit. It's an entity. Now, given that, what we began to see unfold here as the variations of this virus began to unfold, and now you have the Delta, and I think there's another one called the Samda coming up, and there's going to be some other very interesting outcroppings of this that haven't yet manifested. The second one was a bit more concerning. Whether we call that the Delta, I don't think we could limit what's happening right now to a given variant. But this one has a much more sinister mission. And but once again, the reason to even bring this out is because we have the dominion over this. Now, I'll read you a few notes of what we saw and experienced. And we call this the traveler spirit. And I'll read you some notes. We'll make it easy here. Those that are spreading the disease at this point are doing so with direct intent. Now, this is talking about a spirit world. Forget people on the natural plane. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have any idea what's going on. These are called travelers. It's a spirit that attaches to people, primarily those who have had the vaccine. Because one of the purposes behind the vaccine is to more quickly diminish the immune system of the body. You've got to realize that, once again, the plan of the enemy is to depopulate the earth any way possible. And this is part of that. This variant basically sheds the virus. And to those who have been vaccinated, they're even more susceptible to the next, levels that are coming. In fact, we've heard in the news, you have the vaccine, now you got a booster, oh, there's another booster coming up, and you know what? There's a third booster coming up, but that's down the road, but they're already working on a third booster. Give me a break. It's all really designed to tear down the immune system, and it will do that. But anyway, these traveler spirits, and I realize what we're talking about here is very, I can't even think my words aren't, but this is a very tenuous subject because I have no way to prove any of this to you except to tell you what we see, what we know. No one else on the face of the earth would probably have any clue to what we're talking about. But let's continue. These traveler spirits are endeavoring, this is interesting, to stay hidden, and they have attached themselves more to the medical community or those wanting to help. Once again, they are dark entities that find a host and attach themselves to that host. It works most effectively with someone who has had the vaccine, thereby lessening the person's immunity to that spirit or to the spirit. So what's interesting is these helpers endeavor to have human contact and appear very much as though they're trying to help. Thus, their focus to have and maintain human contact so they can spread. So what's interesting, if a medical worker has been vaccinated, he's a prime suspect. And if he picks up this entity, that's really what they're looking for, because they're looking for greater contact with people. And what better way than to those that are workers in the medical community or anything along that line. But what's interesting is once they are discerned, then you're able to have dominion over them, although they will seek to evade judgment, which happens. At the moment of discerning, if you're looking closely, you'll be able to see an overlay of the spirit upon the person. This entity looks more evil than the COVID spirit, obviously. Very dark, with outlines around that are very dark. And if you look closely, they have dark, muddy wings on their back. It's a very filthy spirit. It's almost like a wraith or, some kind of spirit that's very evil. And it's something of a very dark angelic order. These traveler entities seek to feed off the life and energy of people. This entity works to diminish the inherent immunity people have, and they feed off the life energy of the person until the person literally dies. In some ways, it may appear like a vampire spirit, feeding off the blood and the life force of the person. These are the entities moving through human channels with the sole intent of spreading the virus, diminishing the immune system of people, and feeding off their life source, which strengthens them. So I wanted to read that. I wanted to just put that out. Like I was telling Anne, it's not that we're going to do anything different, but be aware. If there's any guidance, it wouldn't be wearing a mask, which is really ridiculous, but it would be just being careful with your exposure around lots of people. Because a lot of people have become vaccinated, a lot, probably 60%. And there's going to be a lot that will have this entity. And believe me, people, I would say maybe 70% of the people on the face of the earth are carrying entities. You don't have to be demonically oppressed. You don't have to be hindered in some obvious way to carry an entity. Many people carry a lot of entities, and that's a whole different subject. So there is a growing infiltration of this that's coming out of the realm of spirit. You remember, Satan's being cast down, and this is a real-time explanation or sampling of what that really means. Because it's one way that the enemy has found to infiltrate the human race through this vaccine thing that literally creates an open door for an entity to come in and attach itself. Anyone that's healthy is not as prone, obviously, to having this kind of an attachment. But when you've gone through the illness, there are certain access points within you that just seem to be open or seem to be a little more prone. And the spirit world is seeking actively, and has always sought actively, to be embodied. I think you remember Christ when he sent the herd of swine into over the cliff. And I think he explained to the disciples at that time that, these spirits seek embodiment. So, if they can't find a human, they'll go jump into a pig or whatever. And that has been the default of the spirit world. It seeks embodiment. And now this has really brought it to a different level. And the COVID thing has opened a door. And the vaccines have opened that door even more further. So we'll end this. We didn't want to exhaust this topic, but it's just something to be aware of. And we'll be doing several more video teachings during the week on some other things that we're tracking on. So Ann and I send our blessings to everyone.